Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 48. And before we get into it, let me just tell you about our new website at www.camerashakepodcast.com. Do us a favor, go on there, check it out, and join our community. If you go to the top left-hand side of the screen, click on Join the Community and subscribe to our newsletter. That'd be super awesome. We've got lots of behind the scenes kind of extra content that we're going to be putting out. It would be super awesome if you would join us. But for now, let's go straight into it with our guest, episode 48. We're back with Dunna Did It. Hey, Dunna, man, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Not too bad. Well, you're back because a few weeks ago, you challenged us to a challenge.
I challenged you to a challenge.
Wait, you challenged us to a challenge.
It was challenging, but we managed it.
We managed. So we got challenged to a photo challenge. Do you want to just explain to our viewers exactly what was happening?
Yeah, so we were trying to come up with some kind of an idea for some kind of a photo challenge that we could do, and the idea of this, the 5 rooms challenge. And I picked 5 rooms because I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and that's about how many rooms there were. But the idea is you go into each room in your house and you pick one item and somehow have to create some kind of a photo scene from those items that you pick. And it doesn't necessarily, there's no kind of directive as far as the items don't need to be the subject of the shot or anything like that. They just have to kind of somehow play a part in that scene. And so you go into your kitchen, your bathroom, your bedroom, your living room, and then there was kind of room for if you have an office or if you just want to leave that 5th one up to whatever. If you want to pull that one from out of a closet or something like that, you could do that too. But the idea is 5 items, all from different rooms within your house that create this one kind of photo.
You know, when you first suggested that last time, I thought, that's going to be easy, right? No problem. And then I started thinking about it, and I realized this was going to be much harder than I thought, wasn't it? And did you guys find that was that the only one who found that tricky, or?
It was hard, man. It was really hard. It took me ages to come up with an idea, but when I did come up with the idea, I was away. It was hard though. How about you, Dunna?
Yeah, honestly, I kind of went the other way. I thought it was going to be hard, and then it wasn't as much, but I went really minimal with mine too. Everyone's going to see kind of what it is in the end, but I tried not to put too many things in the frame. So one of my objects that I picked was specifically my table in my living room. And that was the base of the photo. So I made sure that it made it in, but it was also kind of a backdrop. And then I also used a book as a backdrop, as the back side of it kind of thing. So I tried not to complicate the picture with too many things in it, because I think that was the problem I assumed would happen, is that I have to pick 5 items. They're all from different places in the house. And so then how am I going to make those 5 items fit together? And so then instead of trying to clutter the frame with a bunch of different stuff, it was more I used them in clever ways kind of thing. But yeah, I honestly, I thought it was going to be really hard. And then once I walked around the house and grabbed everything, I kind of threw it together. It probably took me less than 5 minutes to do. And then I slapped an edit on my phone and I sent it over to you guys.
So that's lateral thinking. I
guess, yeah. We went the opposite way on it.
Well, because for me it was more okay, so I've got 5 items, and now and I'm can I get away with putting something else in there? So the challenge became having to restrict myself to 5 items.
Yeah.
Which, when we come to the actual shot, it's debatable as to whether there really are 5 items in the picture or not. But hey,
I'm counting about 25.
Well, that's just, but if you know my my photos, you'll know that they're always busy. That's, minimal might be a good lesson for me. That's for sure.
Looking at my photos compared to your guys is definitely interesting. But I did find that was true as well. Once I got my 5 items and I put everything in there, I was is it too little? I could I could grab 5 more items from each room, and kind of like create a little bit more atmosphere for it. But I did try to stick with just kind of what was, just the 5 items if I could. And it turned out kind of cool, especially once you frame it up and crop it in, like you can kind of hide so much and you can get so interesting with the framing of it as well.
I think that's the beauty of this idea of a challenge, so open-ended. When you guys get to see all 3 of these photos, they couldn't be more different.
Totally.
Gone completely different approaches in all of it. So that's why I love it. I'd encourage everybody out there to actually try this challenge as well. Have a look at how we've gone about it and see if you can come up with some different ideas as well.
And of course, if you did see our last photo challenge a few weeks ago, we went into detail in terms of how we edited the whole thing, how we shot it. We're not going to do that this time. What we are going to do, though, is we're going to give you a behind the scenes kind of impression as to how we put the whole thing together and basically what the thinking was. But we'll get to that in a bit. Now, I think before we get into that, though, let's just see what else has been happening over the last few weeks. Because, Dunna, I know you've been extremely busy pumping out a lot of content.
Yeah. It's been quite the balance lately. The big thing that I'm working on right now is that the Moment International Film Festival. If you guys know Moment, they're known, I think, originally from making lenses for your phone. So these little guys here, right? Let me see if I can get it. You throw that on your phone and you can get like a wider angle and stuff like that. And that's what they're known for. But now they've opened up their store. They're now a retailer for a lot of popular brands that people like. They also do lessons. And then every year they have the Moment International Film Festival, Invitational Film Festival. I don't know what the I stands for, but they have MIF. And they try and do some kind of workshops and stuff with it. And I'm one of the teachers of one of these workshops this year for the audio portion of it, which I'm really excited about. So I've been working really hard on that. If you noticed last week, my video on YouTube Shorts was primarily not my face. I invited a friend, James Archer, in to do his thing and analyze the tests that I've been doing with YouTube Shorts, and that kind of gave me a little bit of a break to work more on the Moment stuff and a little bit less on the YouTube. But yeah, it's been crazy trying to keep up with everything, and I'm super excited about everything that's happening.
So it's the is that film festival? Is it like is that an online thing at the moment, or does it actually happen in person?
It's all online at the moment, pun intended there, and and it's all using phones. So you have to shoot, I think they have different categories. So you got a couple of different categories of types of videos that you can shoot, and huge prizes, like really, really big prizes. And they've been doing this for a handful of years now. And it's always kind of a big deal. And then I believe normally they would do a screening of the winners and some of the kind of top submissions for the end of the competition. I'm not 100% sure what they're doing. You'll have to check out the website to figure out what they're doing as far as the end of it now. I've been so entrenched in trying to get my lesson done. In fact, during this conversation, somebody texted me and was like, "Hey, are all your files uploaded?" So yeah, but it's really cool, and it's really like community led, and it's a lot of fun, and it challenges a lot of people having to shoot with your phone and make the whole thing. Even if you have a fancy camera, you kind of have to pare down and really start to think about your shots and how you're going to put things together and stuff. So it's a cool challenge, if nothing else.
Well, that's really a very interesting challenge generally. And I think, that's very beneficial for anybody, because we can quite easily get to the point where we're really almost like relying on, the latest camera tech. Yeah. We said it the other day when we were talking to one of our guests, and, and we were talking about the latest sort of eye detection, autofocus kind of technology. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, it's, people used to take awesome images even before that was even a thing, even before autofocus was even a thing. So it's like, although these technologies are super helpful, at the base of it, if you creatively, if you can create an awesome photo, then you can create that with just about anything.
You don't need those bells and whistles, right? It's just that they're tools just to make our life that bit easier.
That's right.
100%.
Yeah. So, because we were thinking about this some time ago, my daughter got her first Nikon camera a year ago. And it's like one of these little kids cameras, it's like waterproof and shockproof, and you can throw it from the top of a building and like, drop it down to the Titanic and it'll still work basically. And it's got lots of like parrots and birds on the front and whatever. But it's like something like a 14 megapixel sensor in it. So it's actually not a bad little camera.
Yeah. It's more megapixels than this has.
Well, exactly. And so, I kind of thought like, what if I went out and I shot a project with that camera rather than with my studio camera, for example?
Yeah.
Remind me what color that camera is again?
It's kind of yellow, golden, colorful.
And I can follow you around and video you while you're...
That's the idea. Yeah. That's the idea. Absolutely. 100%. Excellent. I mean, that's the challenge. Challenge. Yeah, I'm challenging myself to do that.
There you go. Actually, there are a couple of channels that I've seen that have done similar things. I think Jessica Kobasi, I think it's how you say her name. I think she's done a challenge where she got a couple of her friends together and they had to shoot on that. And Brandon Wolfel, or that might have been on his channel featuring her or something like that. But I think they did something like that where it was like the disposable challenge or whatever, or like going on and buying the cheapest $15 digital camera that you can find on Amazon and using that and seeing how it looks or whatever. I think that's cool, because then it takes away, like you said, any of that kind of reliance that you have on the fancy tools that we have.
And it's also it's a good exercise, especially in a situation like this. I mean, we're over here in the UK, we're still in a national lockdown and you still can't really go out and do many things. So, if you're looking for something slightly more interesting to challenge yourself, then these are really good little challenges. The 5-room challenge is great. Just reducing your, taking pictures with your phone, for example, if that's all you have, or like, a cheap, like disposable camera or something like that will do it. All of that's very good. And of course, it'll make you a better photographer in the end.
Even if those specific photos aren't useful to you in any way, the experience of it is something that will teach you to be better at what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And of course, anything like that is, it will just drive your creativity further, because, and the next time your main camera doesn't play ball, then at least, you've got something to fall back on.
Yeah, you can always go grab a $5 Fujifilm disposable, and you'll be fine. Shoot that wedding, no problem.
Well, so actually, talking about Fujifilm, one of the challenges for me was I thought I wanted to create the behind the scenes video thing solely on my Fuji X100F, mainly because this camera is not built for video at all. It's totally, it's a fixed focal length, 24 megapixel, camera, which is a great street photography camera. It's great for a lot of things. I got it to limit myself to having a camera with, where I couldn't change the lenses. But the video files look really good. I like them. I like the colors in it. And so I kind of thought, would it be cool to shoot the whole thing on that camera and then not having to go through like the rigmarole of color grading everything to the nth degree, but actually just use the Fuji built-in color profiles. And I did do some color grading on it in the end, actually, but it was just kind of the idea was to simplify the process, And in doing that, I realized that I can totally use that camera for some video stuff.
Totally,
100%.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's what everyone's raving about right now with Sony adding S-Cinetone into the A7S III via a firmware upgrade, because S-Cinetone is supposed to be this magical straight out of camera, you don't have to color grade it kind of thing. And it is like for people who are looking for that workflow, that's really great. I can't see myself ever releasing something without color grading at first. And generally, like at this point, like for my own stuff, which doesn't need to be like super color accurate, and like generally it's only like 2 or 3 shots kind of mixed together. Like it really, even if I shoot S-Log3, like it doesn't take me a long time to grade. It's like I slap on my S-Log3 to Rec 709 thing, and then I'm basically where I would be if I shot without a picture profile anyway. And so then it doesn't take that much time. So like it's cool that it's now there for the people who are going to use it, and like, or for people who aren't comfortable with color grading or something along those lines. But like that's honestly probably my favorite part of the whole process is color grading, and I could just do it all day. I've been thinking more and more about that lately. Like, should I be trying to get like color grading gigs, like where I'm just the colorist on that? Like, would that be, especially as someone who's still learning a lot about this this kind of field and stuff? It's like the different jobs that are throughout filmmaking and photography and that kind of stuff. Right now, as a YouTuber, I have to be everything, but there are jobs out there that are just one or the other, and trying to think about like, oh, would it be cool to just be a colorist for a day instead of having to be a DP and a director and the writer and the talent and the editor and the color grader, like everything that goes into it. So yeah, but that's one of my favorite parts. So
I tell you what, since the beginning of the pandemic, I've been getting almost daily, I'd say probably at least like 4 to 5 times a week, I get emails from like new and upcoming retouches offering their services.
Yeah.
It seems like anybody who runs Photoshop has now turned into a retoucher, but I just get different emails from different people. Like,
that's
almost
so
every
funny.
day.
Hey, they got to do what they got to do. They're hustling.
Oh, that's right. I mean, absolutely. And I do use retouches once in a while, especially for like volume jobs and stuff like that. But I don't have that much output for, it's like there's definitely more retouches than photographers at the moment, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But coming back to the color grading thing, it's for those viewers and listeners who may not be totally familiar with what color grading actually is. So in video, when very often we shoot in what's called a log profile. And Nick, do you want to quickly explain what that means and what that does? Because
sure. So when you shoot in a regular profile like Rec 709, which is a standard kind of space that we use, right? Let's just say that what it's capturing is a line like this, right? Let's just imagine it like that. When you shoot in log, it captures it in a different kind of way. So what that enables you to do, in its simplest terms, is capture more stops of light. So just as an extreme example, if in Rec 709, it will capture like 10 stops of light, right? In certain log profiles, and they all vary a lot in the way that they work, you might be able to capture 15 stops of light. So what that means in real terms is that your highlights won't, and your blacks won't clip as soon as if you were just in a regular Rec 709 space.
So it's a bit like as a photographer, if you shoot in RAW and you get more detail in the shadows and in the highlights, so you can pull them back if you need to. Like if you, for instance, if you shot a JPEG, and something's gone totally black, you're not necessarily able to retrieve a lot of the detail in the shadows, for example, whilst if you shot in RAW.
Yeah.
Is that a similar thing?
It is a similar thing. However, if you do clip your highlights and your shadows in log, you won't be getting those back.
Right.
They're gone. But the dynamic range is so great that you should be all right. There are downsides to shooting in log. Partly you really need to be viewing. You need a LUT on your screen to be able to really see what's going on. If the camera shoots log, generally they will have a LUT built in so you can actually see what it really looks like. So if you don't have that LUT on, for those of you who haven't seen log footage on its own, it basically looks grey. The whole thing just looks really washed out and grey. It's not pleasant. You don't really know what's going on with the colours properly. Yeah. So you need a LUT to kind of see what's actually happening. The other downside, with it is that you do generally need to shoot overexposed compared to what your camera's telling you it's at. And that's because log footage is generally a bit noisier than standard profile. So if you're shooting slightly overexposed, there's lots of different theories and arguments around this online. This is generally what I do. If you're shooting slightly overexposed, you're going to bring down those shadows. Therefore, you're going to bring down that noise at the same time. It'll be less noticeable and visible, because where you see noise is generally in the darker areas of an image rather than the highlights area. So that's the kind of thinking behind it. Takes practice. It really does, like anything. But when you've got it, and you know what you're doing with log, and you know where you need to set it in certain situations, particularly lighting situations, it's a great tool to have. I mean, I'm shooting in log right now for myself. Do I need to for this scenario? So control? No, I really don't.
So it's an interesting thing, you know, because photographically speaking, especially when I shoot in low light situations like concerts, for example, I always shoot slightly underexposed, because you know I know that'll get me. You know, I can crank the shutter speed up a little bit more that way, and I know that I'm going to get that back in post because I know I have that detail in the shadow still. So it's kind of like the exact opposite, you know, theory of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? How that pans out. Log is a funny thing. I mean, there's 3 different log versions for Canon, right? And they all vary in how they work. Some you know, have more dynamic range than the others. And actually, this is just something just an aside, something that's worth mentioning while we're talking about log, is that you will get the most dynamic range when you're using log when you're set at the base ISO for your sensor and your camera. And that'll be in the manual what the base ISO is. So for example, the base ISO for the C70 is 800. So I'm going to get the maximum dynamic range. However, it's slightly noisy. If I shoot at ISO 100, I will get less dynamic range. The dynamic range isn't even above middle gray, like 6 stops above, 6 stops below. It's actually more like 4 to 5 stops above and 7 to 8 stops below that you get. If I shoot higher than 800, then the reverse is true as well. You get more stops in the highlights range than you do in the shadows. So it's a bit of a balancing act, and it is worth understanding how that works for your particular camera and your particular log sort of profile that you're using, because they're all very different.
So Dunna, when you produce your YouTube content, do you go through the same process? Like you shoot it, then you color it afterwards?
Yeah. So I shoot everything now that I have the A7S III and I can shoot 10-bit. I shoot everything in S-Log3, which is like the flattest, most desaturated, and highest dynamic range setting that you can get for Sony cameras. I didn't when I was shooting S-Log2 for a long time, which is slightly less dynamic range. And that was specifically when I was on my A7 III and I could only shoot 8-bit video. And so you have to be careful. That's another thing to keep in mind. And again, like you said, like mentioning understanding your camera and the capabilities therein, like you want to know what the files that you're getting, how far can you stretch them out? Because what it does with log footage is it squishes everything in. So basically, if this is the highest that the camera can capture and this is the lowest that the camera can capture, it squishes them down so that it can fit it inside that file. And then when you get it back out, you have to kind of de-squeeze it. And so if you've only got 8-bit color and you start to try and de-squeeze that file that you've squished, if it was the S-Log3 that's like really squished in, it starts to kind of fall apart, and you can see that. Whereas like if you're into photography and you deal with raw files, you can push that stuff like crazy, like no problem. You can pull it all over the place. Obviously it does have its limits, but when you're dealing with video, each image of those 24 or 25 images per second are significantly smaller than any raw image, unless, of course, you're actually shooting in raw video, which is a whole nother world. but yeah, so I've been shooting everything in S-Log3 since I got 10-bit on the A7S3, and it's absolutely wonderful. I don't ever want to shoot anything else generally. It gives me so much flexibility. Even when I'm in fully controlled situations, I like having the flexibility of, like, let's say you've got practical lights in the background. If they're not dimmable, then shooting an S-Log3 gives me the ability to do some work on them. Whereas, like, if you're shooting in a standard profile, they might just be blown out and there's nothing you can do about it. And you just kind of have to live with it. Whereas, like, having that flat profile allows me to do more with it, even in a controlled situation. It might be as simple as slap on a color space transform so that I'm going from the standard S-Log3 to Rec 709, and I did a good enough job of controlling all my lights in the room that there might not be much work after that. But I love just having the extra flexibility of it. Again, it's like, similar to shooting RAW versus JPEG. It's like, if you're going to shoot JPEG, yes, there are some advantages there, file sizes and the ease of, like, kind of what you see is what you get. Like, you gotta make sure that you're happy with how your image is looking straight at a camera, because you only have so much flexibility editing wise. But I'll almost always take the extra flexibility for my workflow, even for my studio videos here where I'm shooting YouTube stuff.
You know what I always wondered? I'm sure you'd be able to tell me this, actually, because like you said, you used to shoot with 8-bit color, and now you're shooting with 10-bit. When it comes to uploading that to YouTube with all the compression that takes place, is there still, like, a discernible, like, noticeable difference in the video as it then appears on YouTube, or not?
So it's not really about the upload, the way that it looks when you upload it necessarily. It's about the flexibility that you have in editing. Really, like, I mean, even when we if we think about audio, we record at these crazy high bit rates and these crazy high sample rates, but then we always export it at 44:116-bit for CD quality. It's always like this. So you record at as high a quality as you can, even if you're going to export it at a lower quality. And you can tell the difference, but I think the difference is less that you recorded it in 10-bit and exported it into, like, a super compressed MP4 format or whatever, and more so the difference is going to be the fact that you had the flexibility to make the image look better. And you might get less of that banding and stuff, not because you shot in 10-bit necessarily right off the bat, but because when you started to push things around, you didn't start to pull the gradients apart too much, that kind of thing. So it's less that, like, if you just shoot in 10-bit and then upload it straight to YouTube, it's not going to look any better. It's all about the fact that you have more flexibility in the process of color grading and editing and all of those kinds of things.
I think of 10-bit versus 8-bit for color in the way that I think of 4K and 1080. So if I shoot at 4K and then export at 1080, the quality of image is going to be higher still, even though it's still at 1080, compared to if I just recorded it at 1080 to begin with. 8-bit and 10-bit, it's only two difference. Actually, the difference is massive. I mean, I think we're talking like this is going to be completely wrong, but it's like millions of extra colors in there or something ridiculous like that. And where you really notice it is if you take an 8-bit shot of the sky, a blue sky, and you take a 10-bit shot of it as well, you're going to really notice it there. In the 8-bit shot, you might see, as Dunna just said, sort of kind of banding. You might see a bit of sort of blocky kind of pixels and whatnot in there too. But when you then shoot in 10-bit, that is probably going to all be gone. So then when you do export that, even once it's compressed up to YouTube and so forth, that blockiness and that banding is not going to be there.
It might be. But
it might be, yeah.
the compression does have a tendency to add some of that back in. Speaking especially as someone who has a black background, dark colors don't do very well with compression. And, like, you can see, like, I have this light up in my background, and so I've got this kind of gradient that goes up from the middle. It's almost like a vignette kind of thing, and you'll get some banding in those areas if you don't know what you're doing. Like, so you mentioned earlier, making sure that you you overexpose your log footage or expose it to the right so that you're getting as much of that information into the brighter areas. That helps a lot. But in the end, like YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, they're all going to compress the heck out of it, and it will create some of that again, but it does definitely help to have the proper image. If you give YouTube an image with banding on it already, the banding is not going to go away when it compresses it. However, if you give it an image with no banding on it, there's a chance that it's only going to screw it up this much instead of this much, you know?
Now, the other thing I thought that really struck me in some of your recent videos is the fact that you seem to have sort of switched from Premiere Pro to DaVinci.
Yeah.
Why did that switch happen? And what was your
honestly? It was kind of unintentional to start with. So closer to the start of when things were getting locked down one way or another in all sorts of different places, Apple released that they were going to be making Final Cut Pro a 90-day free trial instead of a 30-day free trial. I thought, you know what? Why the heck not? Like, I could maybe make some content out of it. I'm going to try Final Cut for 90 days, and chances are I'll make some kind of a Final Cut versus Premiere Pro video. And so then I tried Final Cut for 90 days, did it for 3 months, and was like, okay, this is kind of cool. Like, I might as well finish the experiment with the other of the like kind of three main ones, or I always thought of them as the three main softwares was Premiere Pro, Final Cut, and then DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci Resolve is free anyway. So I was like, okay, I can go grab a trial of that. But I liked it so much that within the first week I paid for the full version. Not that you need to by any means, but it does. There are a couple of limitations that I would have run into. For example, it doesn't. At the time, I was shooting with my A7 III, so it was all 8-bit, but it doesn't. The free version doesn't deal with 10-bit files. You can't, or you would have to transcode them into a ProRes or something first. But the MP4s, it won't deal with XAVC-S, the ones that I was dealing with anyway. So yeah, I liked it so much that within the first week I had already paid for the upgrade, which is a side note. You have to buy it from a store, and you get a card mailed to you with the license key on it. Like we're in like 2004. Yeah. So you have to like wait for it. So I thought, you know what, I'll go get the full version and like I'll download it, and then they'll send me an email with the license key in it, and I'll just activate it, and all of a sudden I'll have access to like the noise reduction and the color space transform and the 10-bit files and stuff like that. Nope. I had to wait like 2 weeks for it to come here from, I had to find a store that had a key in stock. So like they have limited stock because they like literally sent out like it looked like a birthday card with a little gift certificate card in it. And wow. So they're a little behind the times on that, but they've made some great strides from even like version 15, 16, and 17 seem to be where they really have gone into trying to make it a great editing software. It's also like, it's really all built in. So like, for example, when you're using Premiere Pro, if you want to do your, like any kind of animations and that kind of stuff, or if you want to do any kind of composites, you're going to hop over into After Effects. And Adobe has a great system for that with their Adobe Link. Dynamic Link. Yeah. So, and that it does work really well, but you're still opening another program. And if you want to edit your audio, you might want to open Audition, and you go back and forth between those. And they have made it like reasonably seamless, but again, you're still opening other programs. Whereas in DaVinci Resolve, one of the things that I love is that they built their compositing software directly in. So it's called Fusion, and it's like it's a button at the bottom, and it opens similarly to what you would do with After Effects, where it kind of creates a fusion composition, like you would have to create an After Effects composition and that kind of stuff, and then you go, but it's all like within the same window, like almost like you just open up a new tab in the same window. Same thing with their audio editor and mixing section. It's called Fairlight, and it's all built right into there, so it's easy. You're looking at the same timeline, but in different programs, kind of thing. And I just really love the way that it was laid out. It really felt like a halfway between Premiere and Final Cut, especially being a Mac user, where Final Cut runs so well on the, comparatively to Premiere Pro, who's always, they always have to develop for both PC and for Mac, and that takes extra manpower and it takes extra time, and it's an old system that they're trying to find that place between like updating it or rebuilding it for the new systems that we have, and Apple is obviously changing all the time, so like it's this constant struggle. And so you switch over to Final Cut Pro for 90 days and you realize, oh my gosh, this runs so smoothly, so well. The render times are so fast, that kind of thing. But, personally, I didn't like the way that it was laid out as much and the way that the editing worked on it as much. Like I don't really like the magnetic timeline. I preferred Premiere Pro in that way. And I totally get it. Like I totally understand why someone would like it, but it just wasn't for me. And when I moved over to Resolve, it's like they've got the cut page, which is specifically built for editing and feels very much like a magnetic timeline. And it's built, I think it's supposed to be basically for people coming over from Final Cut Pro. And then they've got a regular edit page that basically functions similarly to Premiere Pro. So I did a video recently on DaVinci Resolve and like a bunch of the shortcuts and stuff that I use. And the first thing that I said is if you go up to the file menu, go to customize keyboard shortcuts, and you can choose, they have presets for you. And one of them is like Final Cut Pro. So you can basically take all the default Final Cut Pro keyboard shortcuts. And then one of them is Premiere Pro, and you can take all the default. So if you're used to Premiere Pro, you switch it over to that, and all of a sudden all your shortcuts work how you knew them, how they, and in the end, like we were kind of saying, I think before we started recording here, all of these programs do the same thing in the end. So if you can make it kind of function in the best way for you, personally, I take all my keyboard shortcuts from Pro Tools because I'm so used to my audio editing software that when I started using Premiere, the first thing I did was went into the keyboard shortcuts and made them all the same as I knew that they were from Pro Tools. So I've kind of carried that through. And the funny thing is that even in DaVinci Resolve, one of the presets is for Pro Tools. So I could go in and just click that. I've edited way too many things at this point. It's hard to do videos where I'm talking about the keyboard shortcuts now because I don't know what the default ones are for any of the programs, because I go in and just like mess with them all the time for whatever I think is going to be easiest. But long story short, yeah, it wasn't supposed to be permanent or intentional that I would switch over to DaVinci Resolve. It was going to be this kind of Matt Diavella-like test where I was like, I did DaVinci Resolve for 30 days and here's what I found out. And then I figured I would probably go back to Premiere because I really like the Adobe system, with the exception of some freezing and having trouble running on the Apple ecosystem sometimes. And then I just absolutely fell in love with Resolve, and it's got its problems, but they all do.
They all do. What does the paid for version set you back? How much is that?
I don't even remember, to be completely honest. A couple $100, something like that. $300 Canadian, I think.
So still cheaper than Final Cut by the sounds of it. And the less said about Adobe's subscription model, the better, probably.
Yeah, I think that's something that really upsets people. I feel so kind of back and forth on it, because it makes it accessible to people who might not be able to get it otherwise. Right? Like not everybody can afford a $500 piece of software, but most people could probably afford to get a $20 piece of software if they could have it for a month, then they could try and learn it, kind of thing. Like, and so it's this back and forth thing where it's like, sure, yeah, over a bunch of years, you're going to be paying way more for it than you would if you just bought it outright. But it makes it so accessible to so many more people. Whereas Final Cut, like if you don't have $300 laying around or whatever it costs, you're just out of luck. You don't get it. With the exception of, obviously they have the trial, but let's say you've done your trial and then you're just like, well, I don't have a budget to drop $300 or $400 on a piece of software. Like, then you are totally out of luck. And I think what people don't put into perspective there is that with Adobe, you can cancel at any time. If you're like, I'm not going to use it this month, I'm not going to be making any money on it this month, like just cancel it for the month and then get it when you are going to be making money with it or something like that. Like the subscription model is this kind of back and forth thing. And I think it just, people see it as a money grab, and because they just want to like villainize companies who do that. And I don't know. I don't know what the intention was.
I mean, I think that the funny thing, especially with Adobe, was of course I think we all remember the days when like virtually everybody was using Adobe products, but nobody had actually bought one.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was
yeah.
In those days, basically, it was. I don't think I can't really remember anybody out of the people that I knew that I used to who'd actually paid for it. And of course, it was horrendously expensive. If you wanted to buy the whole Creative Suite at the time, it was like thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of there were a lot of, what's the word? Illicit copies? Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. And they all had the same name on them. When you type in the code, the name would show up as whatever. I remember, what was it called? Cool Edit Pro or something like that. There was this audio software when I was like a teenager that everybody had the same. You know what it was? It was the original Fruity Loops before it became FL Studio, and everybody had the same copy from Peter Quistgaard or something like that was the guy, and everybody knew if you had an illegal copy of it because it would like showed up at the top of your screen.
Well, I mean, I should say, I've heard about that. Not that I had personally experienced that at all. A quick disclaimer.
Yeah. I'm happy to say that once I got out of my teen years and I started to like take life seriously, I haven't had to do cracked software in a long time. It was good. It was good for learning, and it was before people figured out free trial things and downloads and stuff, which obviously DaVinci Resolve hasn't quite figured out yet. But and it was $419 Canadian for the DaVinci Resolve thing, which is actually. It's a little bit more expensive than Final Cut Pro, but yeah.
So 400 Canadian, that's about 20 pounds, isn't it?
Something like that. Yeah, it's like $8 US. Yeah, and actually, the funny thing, if you buy a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K or 6K, I believe you get the software for free.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you buy a $1,500, $2,000 camera, and you get a $400 piece of software for free.
That's good. So Nick, that could be your next purchase.
I can't be buying another camera.
Nick has literally just sold all of his gear to move fully over to Canon.
Nice.
So he's just dropped, a lot of cash on the C70 and the R6.
Yeah, not allowed to say those numbers out loud.
Well,
nice.
But
that's very exciting though.
Totally worth it.
New gear is always fun. I would love to get my hands on an FX3.
Oh yeah.
And I wish that it would have got announced before I dropped all that money on the A7S3, because it doesn't make sense to buy the FX3 if I already have the A7S3, because they are basically the same camera, just with a different shell. But I love the idea of the new shell that they put out.
Yeah. Did you have a chance to play around with the FX3?
I haven't yet. I got an email from Sony yesterday, kind of being like, "Hey, like we haven't heard from you in a while. Do you want to do any reviews or anything?" And I've been swamped with other gear and stuff to review yet. But it's somewhere on my list to do a video on the FX3, and I'll have to get a loaner to do that. But I'm not really expecting much from like it is the same brains as the A7S III. Like all the color profiles and all the recording capabilities are all exactly the same. It's really just the shell is different, and the fact that it comes with the top handle that has the XLR inputs and stuff like that. Like it's really the way that I talked about it, because everyone was all upset that they basically put out the same camera. I'm like, think of it as like there's like the regular car version, and then they put out the hatchback. And it's like, it's got the same motor in it. It's still got the same AC and whatever, but you just wanted to have the hatchback for a little more space in the trunk, or to open it up a different way so that you could go camping in it or whatever, you know. It's like just that slight difference, and you get a new model out of it, kind of thing. It's like that's really what they did. It's like they just made more options, which they didn't have to do that. You know, they could have waited until they had some more exciting things to do, and it probably would have cost them less, because they wouldn't have had to make new molds and new technology and do anything different. They could have just kept using the same body like they've been doing with the A7S and A7R and all that kind of thing. They're basically the same body. But they did give us that option. And so when people were upset about it when it first came out, and it was almost the same as the A7S on the inside and the kind of brains of it, I was like, I feel like you're not seeing the whole picture of what they've done for the community and for filmmakers and that kind of stuff. Not so much for photographers, but anyway, you can tell I've put a lot of thought into this.
That's for all the Sony shooters out there, of course.
There you go. Yeah, anyone who's on. Neither of you guys are Sony shooters, so
not at the moment. But I think Nick was you were really considering Sony at the time, weren't you?
I was.
You couldn't make up your mind for a while.
Yeah, I was considering I was waiting for the A1 announcement to see what that was going to be all about. And then, such a long story, but it came down to that, and then it came down to, okay, well, if it's going to do that, what's going to then be my main video camera? Is that going to be stills as well? What's going to be? And then after tons of research, I settled on the C70 and the R6 as the best combination of products. So the C70 is my main video cam, R6 is my main stills cam, and R6 also doing as a secondary video cam as well. Yeah. So and obviously sharing lenses between them was a big bonus.
You decided you didn't need 8K for any longer than like 5 minutes.
The R6 doesn't do 8K.
Oh, there you go. So you didn't need 8K at all.
Didn't want the 8K. It just seemed it just didn't make any sense to me to go for the R5, which is the one that has the 8K RAW.
Yeah.
But there are.
Does it have 8K for real? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But the R6 is cool. It's the video capabilities are great. Not that I've actually used them yet. But the it does 4K. It does 4K 120. 60, 4K 60.
4K 60.
And it does overheat.
Yeah.
It's still got those same R5 problems, but I didn't buy it for video. It's secondary video. That's why I went for the C70 as primary video. Yeah.
Because it's a secondary video camera, we always have the Nikon D750, which, does a brilliant job.
I mean, it's phenomenal video, yeah.
Yeah, we're not even going to mention 4K.
No, that's still got good video in the right conditions, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, right, I remember the days when I used to shoot like 8mm videotape. So, I mean, in comparison to that, even my phone is a marvel of like alien technology, So that's, I'm not complaining at all. But yeah, I mean, it's, I've been thinking, I mean, I've been sort of playing with the idea of changing systems, and I'm still in that phase where I'm like, I haven't been able to make up my mind at all,
Yeah, just I don't know. It seems like I feel like people put way too much weight on that. It's like whatever, kind of what we were talking about with software before. It's like they all do the same thing in the end.
Exactly.
all the different tools, sure, they all have pros and cons and stuff like that, but like in the end it's going to come way more down to whether you know how to use them and whether you know your system or not, and you have to understand and be able to work around the cons of your system and really use the pros to your advantage. But like once you're into a system, like at that point, like at least for a while, definitely stop worrying about the switching over and stuff like that. Obviously, like you've got experience, so this might not be something that you are taking lightly or whatever. But
no, I mean the thing is, like, oh, hang on, my dog's breaking in. So a couple of weeks ago, Dunna challenged us to a 5 rooms challenge. So just to recap, the idea was that we would pick up an object from 5 separate rooms in the house, and we would bring them together to create one photograph. So the challenge was really to find objects that would work together as an ensemble cast almost in the photograph. And we've mentioned earlier how difficult that was. But Nick, how did you how hard was that for you?
I struggled is the honest answer. Because I did 3 or 4 times I walked around the house on different days, looking for objects that I think could go together. And I had no inspiration whatsoever coming to me for whatever reason. I was probably overthinking it more than anything else. And then one day I was doing something completely different and it hit me. So, that could work. And I just in my head thought, yep, yeah, I've got that in that room, that in that. Yeah, perfect. I'm going to go with that. And I settled on that. Yeah, it was tough. I found it really hard.
Dunna, so you've already told us that you managed to pick up different objects and then put them together in a slightly sort of unconventional way. Because the thing I really liked about your photo was the fact that you said like, oh, well, I'm going to use the table that I place everything on as one of the objects. And I really hadn't thought of that at all.
Yeah. I thought about using, I have a table in my studio here that is kind of just like my go-to product shot table. And I thought about using that at first, and then but I really like taking photos on my living room table. It's got a really cool grain. It's like a live edge kind of wood thing to it. So it's like it really becomes a feature in some of my photography. And so I thought, you know what, I could either use like the flower vase that's sitting on that table, or I could just like use the table itself. And one of my objects was a book, one of my wife's books, and I wanted to use that as like the backdrop. It has like a cool texture to it, and it's just like a nice dark gray kind of thing. And so I thought I'm going to use that as a backdrop. So if I'm using the book as the backdrop and the table is underneath, it's basically doing the same purpose. So I might as well like call that one of the objects kind of thing. And it kept it really, really minimal for me, which was, I think it kind of goes along with my style. I don't necessarily like to like fill up my frame with too many things. And I think beforehand, not unlike Nick, I kind of thought everything out before I walked around the house. I did a mental walk around and kind of picked my objects and kind of planned it ahead without actually like walking around and looking, because I thought that might complicate things more than anything, because you start to see too many things and get too much going on in your head. So I did a lot of the mental work ahead of time and tried to kind of anticipate the issues that I was going to have. The other thing that I did is I just bought the Sigma 105 millimeter macro. And so I was pretty sure I was going to want to do something really tight and probably of an object that was pretty small. So that kind of led me in a specific direction too. So kind of, I picked my lens ahead of time before I even knew what the photo was going to be of. I was like, I just felt inspired to take photos with my new lens because it's a new toy. Right. And so that kind of, I think it guided me towards what I chose to do and how I chose to do it. And I would challenge you guys to figure out what my 5th item is, because I used it in a really interesting way.
It seems like I see the Pentax, and then there seems to be something like on the camera, like Is that the shutter button, or is it something that's behind it?
Okay, so you got the Pentax. The obvious one is the other obvious one is that little dropper bottle, right? And we got the table and the book in the background. And then there's the fifth item.
Is the fifth item off shot, out of frame, but reflecting in that bottle?
It might be. I don't know, actually. I don't know if it's in the... No, you can't see it in the bottle, I don't think.
Okay.
But it is just slightly out of frame. I guess maybe if we've got our little featurettes there, it'll give it away in that. But so when the people watch it, they'll see that. But I used from my kitchen, I used the biggest knife that I could find.
Ooh.
And I used it just in the bottom of the frame. So like just like this to cause like the reflection on the bottom there. So that little colorful blue and purple flare that's coming out of the bottom, that's the knife in the bottom of the frame.
I like the fact that that your photo and my photo have the one thing in common, which is the film camera.
The old film camera, yeah.
the cop-out object, I like to call that. I'm joking.
I needed a subject for the photo, and that ended up having to be it. But I didn't have any rubber ducks handy, so
I thought exactly the same thing. I need to have like a central piece. Yeah. For it, and that was exactly it. And what people could possibly see in the background right behind me is like a shelf of Russian doll type of lenses. They'll be forever known as the Russian dolls now.
Yeah.
But above that is a shelf with lots of old cameras. So that was it's an easy no-brainer for me to pick.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always in the background. You never get to see it in my shot because it sits right there on top of this little stack of books.
Right.
And right now it's still set up from taking that photo. But yeah, it normally sits right there, but I stand right in front of it, so nobody ever gets to see it.
What I love most about our pictures is they're all very different, really, really different, and that says so much. There's lots of I think our personalities coming out in them. The way we thought about doing it. I've certainly gone for something that in a way that I've not done before. I thought I'll use it as an opportunity to do something different. And Kay is a master at flat lays, so I thought I'd steer clear of that. So, there's no way it's going to be any good. So we've talked about our photos a little bit now, but it's time to get into a bit more detail. We've each done a very short video on our behind the scenes for this. So we're going to have a little watch of Dunna's first, and then we're going to ask him about how he went about it.
All right, so I've picked out my 5 objects for the 5-room challenge. The first one actually being this table that happens to be in my living room. I really love to shoot on this. And then in the bedroom, I found this book. It has a really cool kind of texture to it, and it's just kind of a basic gray. So we're actually gonna be using this as kind of a backdrop. From the bathroom, I've got this beard oil, which is in this really cool kind of plain, rustic looking brown bottle. From my office, I got my Pentax ME Super. This is gonna be kind of the star of the show, our center point. And then finally from the kitchen, I got this big knife, and we're actually going to be using this as kind of a way to reflect right close to the lens itself. So this is going to be completely out of focus. You're not actually going to see this, but I'm just going to hold it right up to the bottom of the lens and see if I can get some kind of cool light, almost like light leaks. I'm going to be shooting on the Sony a7 III with the 105mm macro lens from Sigma. I just got this lens, so I'm all excited to use it. So I know that it's going to be a pretty kind of tight frame. And then with the knife, all I'm gonna do is kind of hold it up right in front of the actual lens itself and just try and find the right spot for it. All right, I got my shot. It's looking pretty good. I'm actually going to transfer it straight from the a7 III over to my phone and do the edit in Lightroom Mobile so you can see the before and the after here.
So that was Dunna's video. Dunna, talk to us, man. Tell us how you created it. The photo is fantastic. I love looking at it.
Sweet, man. Yeah, thanks. And it was a really interesting thing because you can obviously take 5 things and shove them in a photo that like have their own distinct, like that you can point them out. And one of the things that I tried to do was use the objects in kind of interesting and clever ways so that they weren't necessarily part of the photo. You don't think of the background or the backdrop or the base of it necessarily as an object in the photo, but in every photo there's something that is, either the human or the object is sitting on or sitting in front of, that kind of thing. So I tried to use the objects in that way as well. So obviously we've got the table being kind of our base level thing, and in this case I felt like I could call it one of the objects because it's an interesting looking table. It's got a really cool type of wood. I wanted to have almost kind of like that dark room kind of look, and so I chose that book for the backdrop. I really like the texture of it, although with the shallow depth of field, the texture kind of loses a little bit there, which was I kind of had to play with that a little bit as well. The camera was really, I chose the camera only because I felt like I needed to have some kind of like an interesting subject. And so I went with that because it ends up being the subject of a lot of my stuff. It's either a knife, a coffee cup, or my film camera that I never use because it looks cool. And then obviously like the little dropper bottle is more just for kind of a stylistic reel. Or stylistic reason, I should say. There's really nothing like too interesting about it except that like it's got like a cool color and it's got a really minimal style, and it kind of shows that we're within that world of like vintage cameras and leather goods and that kind of stuff with the brown bottle, that kind of thing. And then the fifth element, the tricky one that I used in there being the knife. I knew that I wanted to use it as a reflective surface. I wasn't 100% sure right off the bat as I chose it, but I was like, okay, I'm going to grab the biggest knife that I can, and I'm going to see like maybe there's somewhere where I can use it just to reflect some light or something like that, or as like kind of a blurred out object. And what I ended up doing was putting it right underneath the lens and kind of reflecting up, and you get these really cool they almost look like light leaks, but really what you're seeing is the super out of focus edge of the knife right in the front of your frame. And there were some points where you really have to kind of play with it to try and get it so that you're not seeing too much. It starts to actually cover up some parts of the photo when you're looking through your viewfinder and you're tilting the knife and trying to make it reflect the right amount but not cover up anything. For some of the shots that I took, there wasn't you couldn't see enough of the table for me to really feel like I called it one of the objects in my presentation kind of thing. But so really it was use these 5 objects, but then also how can you use them in a creative and kind of clever way? And that's what I came up with. And it's a really it looks like a really simple photo, really. Like it looks like if you didn't know any better, you'd be like, okay, he plopped a camera down, plopped a bottle next to it and snapped a photo. And you wouldn't necessarily know how much went into the making of it, or that I specifically chose that spot. It's also all just natural lighting that's in my living room. I didn't use any lights or anything like that. I wasn't sure if that was going to be cheating, so I just decided to go with natural light. I was like, does a light count as an object? No. But yeah, so I tried to just kind of go super simple, and I like the way that it turned out, and I think that it's one of those things that, like I said, if you look at it right away, you wouldn't think that there was a lot that went into it, but there was a decent amount of thought and work that went into getting that kind of final image. Not a lot of time, but a lot of mental work.
Oh yeah, I mean that it's not something you notice at first, but that knife really makes it. It's such a nice little touch, that, and that, and the bottle itself, because it's such a good, as good looking as bottles go. It's really interesting to look at. It really makes it off, and the framing is beautiful on it. It works really, really well for me. And I was going to ask about the light, whether that was just natural or not. It felt like it probably was, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, nothing fancy happening there. Just whatever happened to be hitting the living room table. I didn't move the table or anything. I just kind of slapped everything down and in the spot that looked like it was going to get the light that I wanted, and at the angle, so that I wasn't blocking out too much of the light and that kind of stuff. But the bottle really ended up having a really nice kind of line on it. The nice thing about circular or cylindrical objects like that is that you get that kind of, you get those vertical lines where the light hits it in the right way. And so you get this kind of cool look on it where you get lots of contrast all within that one image.
Yeah.
Or within that one object, I should say.
I think the tricky thing with photographs like this is very often, to really make it look like it's natural light. So even if that was like, let's say, a full studio shot with like artificial light or something, you'd actually put a lot of work into making it appear like it's natural light. Which is the thing with flat lays very often, because you just want to make it look like it's beautiful window light when actually it's all just shot in a dark studio.
Yeah, totally.
So I think when you're in the lucky position where you actually find a pocket of light, like in your living room or somewhere, where you can utilize that, then that's fantastic.
Yeah. I've got I'm lucky in our place because we've got windows on two sides, so generally you've got nice light kind of filling up the room, so you've got a decent amount of soft light in there. But then if you hit it during the right time of day, you can also get that nice kind of beamed in from one of the many windows that are surrounding you. So it kind of like, it's got a really great setup, unless you want to control it. Because you just gotta like either wait for the right time of day or don't shoot photos, because it can also be really annoying if you're like, okay, I want this kind of light, but right now that's not what we have, or today's overcast, or whatever it happens to be. You're just like, you're totally out of luck. You just got to wait for the right moment. And when I shot that photo, I got what I wanted anyway, which was super lucky.
All in, how long did it take you to kind of create this photo?
I'd say 8 minutes.
Brilliant.
Yeah, awesome. and here's the fun part. So I mentioned earlier that I did a lot of the planning ahead of time. So I mean, if you count that and like the amount of time that I was thinking about it, maybe like a half an hour total, throughout the last couple of weeks or whatever, when I was like pondering what I might do. But yeah, it's like, honestly, I walked around the house, I grabbed everything I needed, I threw it all on the table. The light looked how I wanted it to. I knew what lens I was going to use. I knew kind of how I wanted the framing. I knew that I didn't want it directly at the background. I wanted to have a slight angle. So it's like I had done most of the work in my head, almost like I could see the photo before I took it, kind of thing. And then the knife took a little bit of time to just kind of get that angle. And so, I mean, I'm sure it felt like a lot longer, but if I was to really time it, I'm sure it was only a couple of minutes, but to try and get that just right where it was a nice kind of soft light on the bottom that was adding in there something that looked like a light leak without covering up part of the frame. And then to edit it, I didn't even bother going into Lightroom or Capture One or anything. I transferred it directly from my camera to my phone, and I just quickly whipped it up in Lightroom Mobile, and I emailed it straight to you from my phone.
Brilliant.
Amazing. I love that. Yeah. You see, it, Dunna, what you're just saying there about the thought that went into it before you even set up a camera, right? That's just testament to how important it can be to just do a bit of planning, and how much simpler it makes your life when you go into it. Because yep, I know exactly where they're going to go. I know how I'm going to frame it. I know what I'm going to do with this. I already know what I've got going on with the light. I know where the camera's going to go. And you're away. And like you say, it took you 8 minutes once you started.
Yeah.
Love it.
So let's have a look at Nick's photo, and we're going to watch Nick's video first before we get into some detail on that.
Hey folks, and here's my short video on how I went about taking my photo for the 5 rooms challenge. So first up, I decided that I would go with colour and light as a theme, and I went around my house and I grabbed some of those objects. Let's see how that looked. So we've got an Edison bulb lamp, which has come from my bedroom. We've got a candle, which I took from the living room. A rubber duck from the bathroom, because why not? And we've got a classic 70s style lava lamp. And we've got a Galileo thermometer, which came from my hallway. I'm using the Canon R6. It's got a Tamron 90mm macro lens on the front. And from a settings perspective, I've gone for 5.6, so there's still some depth of field there. ISO 100. And then my shutter speed was 2 different shutter speeds, because I took 2 shots as a composite here. I had one was set at around 1/250th of a second. That was to freeze the flame and to give a little more detail in the Edison bulb itself. My other shot was then at 10 seconds. And so now let me talk about the lighting. There was no lighting. This is a 10-second exposure where the only lighting involved was with my iPad. So what I've done is, you'll see the blue and the purple kind of lines at the back. That's my iPad. And what I've done is put a JPEG of those kind of lines, turned on my iPad, turned up the brightness on the iPad to its max, set the camera rolling, and then I've slowly walked behind the scene to create those lines. Once I'd gone all the way across, I then moved around the objects to give some of that light onto those objects as well. So I've effectively light painted the scene. It probably took a couple of tries to get that just right, but other than that, it was as simple as it sounds. From an editing perspective, there wasn't a lot that went into this. I composited those 2 photos together, and then simply was in Lightroom, and I boosted the contrast, the highlights and the shadows a bit, a little clarity in there too, and I also added a little orange to the highlights and some magenta to the shadows, because that's what just felt good to me in this particular image. Anyway, it's a bit different. It's not something I normally do, and I guarantee it's going to be different to the other guys. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you liked the photo. And if you haven't tried out light painting with an iPad, go do it.
Right, so Nick, give us the lowdown on your photo. How did you put that together?
Yeah, as I've said a couple of times now, I struggled coming up with an idea of what to actually do. And then I was actually doing some, I've been doing a lot of self-portraits and whatnot at home lately, and I was doing some with gels. And it didn't hit me when I was doing them, but some of the gels were still out. And I looked at them, and I think maybe the light from the living room window was coming through it, and it suddenly just hit me. What if I try and do a photo where the objects relate to light and or color? And so that's what I did. And I then mentally, much like Dunna, I sat on the sofa and I thought, right, okay, yeah, there's something in that room, there's something in that room. And right, that's what I'm going to go with, because they relate to light and they relate to color. So that's why I chose the objects that I chose. So the 3 objects you can see are the Edison bulb kind of light, the candle, and the yellow rubber duck from the bathroom. What's nigh on impossible to make out is that on the left-hand side there, the red, that's actually a lava lamp. And on the right-hand side of the picture, where it's kind of darker with all the bokeh going on, that's actually and I still can't, when I was doing my little video, I couldn't remember what it was called, and I still can't remember what they're called right now. But it's one of those like thermometer style, in big glass tubes. Galileo Galileo thermometer. I think that's what it's called.
With the little bulbs in it?
Floating in
Yeah.
water.
Right,
That's
okay.
what that is there. So they're really close at the edge of the table, right near the lens. And then the other items are actually set much further back. And then about 1.5 meters behind that is a black background. So that's the general kind of setup. There's probably several inches actually in between each of those items. But the way it's compressed makes it obviously look a lot closer. So from a lighting perspective, there's no lighting involved as such. I light painted it. So how I actually went about that is you see the blue streaks in the background. What I actually did was try a new technique, and I got my iPad. I got an image on there of varying colors, different colors of blue. There's about maybe 10 different lines across the screen of the iPad. And I took a 10-second exposure, and I literally, on the edge of the table, just dragged my iPad across like that to create those light streaks.
Cool.
That took about 5 seconds to get it flat and get it the way I wanted it to look. And then I took the iPad with the light on. This is all at full brightness. And then went, and even the long exposure was enough to expose the items, but just to add a little more to it, I went in with the iPad and went around the items to cast some of that light onto those objects. So that's how it got lit. This ended up being a composite of 2 photos. One photo is everything that you see except the flame and the detail in the center of the Edison bulb. That wasn't at a long exposure. That was done at like 1/250 of a second, something like that. So I could freeze the motion in that. I could freeze the motion in the flame, and the shutter speed was such that actually I could get some decent detail in the Edison bulb, because it wasn't quite there. It was more blown out when you had a longer exposure.
I'm loving the idea with the iPad though, man. That's very cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I don't know where I saw it. I think I just happened across something online one day a while ago, and I thought, oh, that's cool. I'll try that one day, and just stored it in the back of my mind. And I thought, yeah, let's just give it a go. It's light, it's color, perfect opportunity.
Did you have to do several takes on it, or was it like a one take wonder type of thing?
Yes and no. I did several different setups, and what I mean by that is just where the items were positioned. I moved them, and I took a few photos like that until I landed on this setup here. Once I landed on that, I think I only took 2 shots. One shot, I did the light painting twice because I didn't quite get it right first time. I moved too quickly with the iPad. And then the additional shot on top was then just took one photo for the flame and the detail on the Edison bulb. Yeah,
there's so much color going on in that. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, okay, time for you, my friends. Let's have a look at your video first, though. It's okay, as you know, I said earlier, master of flat lays. It's awesome. Love it. Tell us about it, man.
Well, I think, I mean, the first problem was actually to find the objects, to find objects that would sort of relate to each other in some way, shape, or form. And I think much like Dunna, I went for that kind of leather, cloth type of coffee dark kind of sensibility. And so I was like umming and ahhing about different things, and I probably had like 20 objects in the end that I'd sort of kind of almost like earmarked for it. And then I realized that I needed to find a centerpiece, something that was going to be the focal point of the image, and so I just it was just a second nature to basically pick a classic camera. This is like one of my favorite pieces on my shelf. It's an old Olympus, film camera, and then from there on, you then kind of start building stuff around that. And as you mentioned, I love doing flat lay, so it was kind of second nature to really go and do a flat lay because that's just what I just love doing it. And I like the process of putting it together. So I forever fiddle with every little detail on it, and then I literally take like probably 3 photos, and that's it. So once it's set, it is set, and then it's really just a matter of photographing it. So. So different objects are really just there's an old army bag that I picked up, which is like, I think it's like a 1950s British army gas mask bag that I picked up because I thought it would make a really awesome little camera bag when I'm just out and about, and it still smells of the gas mask, though. That's the funniest thing about this. It's like it seriously. It has this rubbery thing, and the one thing I found in there was like it's this little pot of like waxy kind of stuff that I'm not too sure what they use that for. Probably to kind of keep the rubber of the gas mask lubricated or something like that.
Yeah.
But the whole thing smells of that. So it's got this weird, I don't know, this chemical war kind of smell to it. It's just weird.
It just smells like war.
Yeah, it smells like war. So, but it's a cool little bag, and I like it, to take out and all that. And then that's my journal that I use. Nick, you know it well. I use it all the time. It's like the thing I take with me because I'm that like old school that I literally have an old leather-bound journal that I use for all sorts of different things. Whilst because at some point I got rid of using scheduling apps on my phone, and I wanted to go totally analog when it comes to that. And actually it's helped me to kind of organize my life better. It's just because I can sit down every morning over a cup of coffee and just go through my day and actually handwrite it all in. And so it's just a thing that, I don't know, it's just my little routine in the morning, and it's kind of cool. And of course that goes along with coffee because that's also a big part of that. And all the Canadians on the call will basically, attest to that. That's the way to go.
The cup, my friend.
Absolutely, 100%. So, so it was kind of clear, from the outset that coffee would have to play some kind of role in that. And then really, I found an old cast iron skillet that I love. But again, it's like one of these oldie worldy kind of things that seem to work really quite well with the whole thing. And everything else in there is really just dressing. So once you put the things together, it's like when I make a flat lay, one of the things that I like doing is some people like this really clean kind of look. I always like to put a whole lot of atmosphere in and add some grit, and utilize maybe some of the other objects that are already in the shot, or just to give it some kind of context and like dirty it up a little bit. It's a little bit like the comparison between the Star Wars prequels and the original trilogy, right? In the original trilogy, everything's dirty and used, and that's why it looks the way it looks, and that's why I think why people love it, because it's got this used look. And then of course you've got the prequel where everything's squeaky clean and new, and it just looks like trash. Do you know what I mean? It's I'm very sorry for those Star Wars fans out there who are into the prequel, but let's thou shalt not speak of those on this podcast. Anyway,
so you're saying I shouldn't start speaking like Jar Jar Binks anytime soon?
Whoa! Step to the heart, man. So, yeah, I mean, I think when I first saw that first movie and the first trade, what is it called? The trade corporation dude comes in and speaks with an Italian accent. That was I was done with that movie right there, and that was like 3 minutes in. It's like, right, we're done here. That alien does not have an Italian accent. Forget about it. So, anyway, so yeah, I mean, that's so the beans and the and the dirt and everything else. That's actually just coffee powder. So I kind of I thought like I had beans and I had powdered coffee and whatever.
Which room did the straw come from?
The rabbits. That came actually. So that was that was literally just something I thought like, okay, I need some more like atmosphere.
Texture.
Yeah, some more texture in there. And so my studio bit, my little home studio bit is basically there's like a little sort of a glass French door leading out into the garden, and the rabbit hutch is right opposite that. So I literally just, as I was thinking about it, I just turned my head and I'm looking right at the rabbits and I'm thinking straw. That's it. So, so that was that. Yeah, and that's really basically it. I mean, technically speaking, it wasn't a particularly complicated shot. The whole arrangement was really just placed on the same old wooden oak board that I've been using for years to photograph virtually half my life on. It's this big wooden board. I think it used to be a shelf in a storage room or something like that. And it's just got this great texture, and I use it for so many different things. I use it as backgrounds. I use it as I use it for flat lays and all the rest of it. And that's just my go-to background. It's just one of those things. But yeah, I mean that was it. It was lit with a 7-foot octobox,
which is massive.
Yeah, because So the thing there is, you want to create that appearance of it being big window light, and of course, from a studio perspective, if you want, you need to have a big light source that's basically big and soft. So a big softbox.
7 foot.
Yeah, 7 foot. Yeah.
Like the diameter of it is 7 feet.
Yeah.
That's gigantic.
No, yeah, it's huge. But I've used it for many things, and it's I love it. It's actually great for portraits, believe it or not, because it's such a big light source, and it just creates that really soft wraparound light. So the thing with this is, and although it does fall off into the shadows a little bit, I like that because it gives it some contrast. There were no reflectors set up anywhere. It was literally just that one light. So it was so big that it literally just wrapped itself around it. And that's why I like it. It's a no frills kind of deal. It's basically just set that thing up. It has this really beautiful soft light, and I've used it for many things. And it was kind of like, again, it was sort of a go-to kind of a thing for me.
Well, and it does make it feel natural too, because if you think about like, if I imagine this, one of the things that I love about this photo is that I feel like it does feel like all of the things pulled from a single scene. Like it looks like you went camping.
Yes.
And you had the bag is like what you were carrying your stuff in, or you like, you're out and about and you've got all this stuff on you for like a little camping trip or something like that. Like you got to eat dinner, you got to have coffee, you're going to take pictures while you're out there, and you want to take field notes kind of thing. And you put it all in the bag. It almost looks like it just like spilled out all together. And I think that's one thing that your photo has that maybe didn't quite come off in the other two, like mine with the camera and the bottle. It's like, what are those doing together? That's my beard oil in that bottle. Like, like, I mean, maybe you could assume that it's like some kind of lubricant for my old camera or something like that, but like they don't really technically go together, except for just like aesthetically they look nice together. And then obviously like in Nick's we've got the duck and the candle. It's like, kind of got this like, what are these doing here together? And it's more about the colors and stuff like that. But like yours is, like it's got a little bit less of like the complication that me and Nick did with our fancy light trickery, but it's just like such a story scene. Like it's like I feel like that scene you can make up a story in your head really easily with it.
And I think that's exactly that's the trick with flat lays. It's the storytelling, the context kind of aspect, because you can pick up some random And I think that's for me was actually the challenge. Really, was to find objects that would relate to each other in in texture and in color and in story, in context. Basically, I think I spent the most time thinking about that. I mean, I spent probably a whole week just trying to fit that together, because then the actual process of laying this out on the floor was super quick. I think that to arrange that maybe, took me, I don't know, half an hour, maybe, if even. There were probably a couple of lighting tests, and that was it. And then, it was good to go, really. So it was, simple. And then, of course, the editing. The editing on this is not that heavy either. It's a little bit of, dodging and burning pretty much going on, but that's about it, and then it's just a matter of, I feel one of the hard things with flat lays is the cropping. The crop is really essential. And because again, that's part of the storytelling aspect. For me always is that, the way you crop it will basically push the emphasis on wherever you want it to be. And so it'll put whatever you want to be the focal point into the focal point. And so in this case, it's a little bit like you've got the camera. The camera quite clearly is the focal point, and everything else is like creeping into the scene, in a way. And that works just as well as a square crop for the same reason. So whether it's an 8x10 crop or a square crop, in this case, is actually neither here nor there. So that's that is always the thing. But that's really, that is why I love making flat lays so much. Is because you can kind of tell that story in a photograph rather than, And in the video that I made, in the behind the scenes video, it was all about telling the story of how that picture came together, and that's basically.
So I'm wondering whether you should be disqualified.
Again,
whether each bean and whether each coffee bean should be counted as a single object. I don't know.
Even if you don't go into all the beans in that photo, you got a lot of extra stuff in there.
Yeah. So I mean, that's of course, that's just kind of set dressing, and as Nick knows, and I'm sure as our listeners know, set dressing is one of the things that I love doing all the time when I do like bigger shoots. I just like fiddling around with stuff and putting stuff in that work together, like this tea towel thing and the wooden spoon. None of that really qualifies as I mean, you could argue these are additional objects for sure.
I think me and Dunna definitely are. Yeah.
So now that you've seen our efforts, why didn't you just go right ahead and create your own 5-room challenge at home? We would love to see what you come up with. All you've got to do is pick one object from 5 rooms in your house, put them together, take a photograph, and tag us on Instagram by using the hashtag CameraShakePodcast. Now, we have come to the end of this week's episode. Again, if you are listening to the audio version of that, you might as well just head over to YouTube, where you can not only hear our sultry voices, but see our lovely faces in full Technicolor. Send us a like, click the subscribe button. That would be super awesome. Also, you could join the CameraShake community. Just head over to camerashakepodcast.com, join the community there. It'd be lovely to see you there. You can also get hold and watch some extra behind the scenes footage. But for now, we will say goodbye. We'll see you again next Thursday.